Hi, this is Andrea Amico.
And this is Mary Marwig, and you're listening to
Firewalls
Firewalls
don't
Don't
stop
Stop
dragons.
Dragons.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Kerry Parker, and today we have episode 464 for January 19th, 2026. Got a great interview for you today. We're talking again with Andrea Amico from Privacy for Cars. I first interviewed him about 5 years ago, and then we did it again 3 years ago, and it's honestly just been too long. And I know they just put out a really, really big report about how various audio brands, and by various, I mean like 50 of them, are respecting your data deletion and privacy rights based on California law. And it's really pretty eye-opening. So I figured it would be a good time to bring him back. And as a bonus, we've got Mary Marwig, who is an employee of Privacy for Cars as well. And so we've got a bit of a tag team interview for you today. Real quick, before we get into that, a couple of reminders. The listener survey for 2026 is out. I do this once a year, every January. It's been out for, I guess, a couple weeks now, and I've got some responses, but I would love to get more. And to incentivize that, I am giving away free PDF copies of my book to the 5 random respondents. And it's anonymous. You don't have to give your email address, or you can give me a throwaway email address. But if you want to enter, give me some way to contact you. And if I pull your name out, then you'll win a copy of my book. But honestly, I really want to learn more about you, the audience, and make sure I understand your needs. And, let me know if there's some ways I could make this podcast better. So you can find that by going to fdsd.me/survey2026. I am also, at the exact same time for the month of January, doing a new patron promotion where I'm giving away Dragon Challenge coins. Now, there's lots of perks for being a patron. You can join anytime, but once or twice a year, I put together a promotion where you could also get one of these super cool, security-enhancing, highly collectible Dragon Challenge coins. To learn all about those and take a look at the coins and see what they can do, and all the details of the promotion, go to fdsd.me/promo126, as in January, the first month, 2026. Okay, so there's not a whole lot more that I need to do to set up this interview. We do throw out a couple terms I probably should define real quick. I talk about OBD2, that's Onboard Diagnostic version 2. This is the port underneath the driver's side, usually of your car, where you can attach a dongle or something to get information directly out of your vehicle. This is what the service people often use. And the other term we throw out that we don't really explain right away is UX, or user experience. So when that comes up, you will now know what that means. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get to our interview with Mary Marwig and Andrea Amico from Privacy for Cars. Andrea Amico is one of the nation's leading authorities on vehicle privacy and cybersecurity. He's also the founder of Privacy for Cars, the world's leading authority on vehicle privacy and data security. Welcome back to the show, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Kerry. It's a pleasure to be back.
And Mary Marwig is a pro-consumer, pro-business privacy advocate who is optimistic about what data privacy rights mean for everyday people and for the companies they do business with. At Privacy for Cars, she helps protect driver and passengers' personal data while creating business opportunities for automotive companies. Welcome to the show, Mary.
So happy to be here, Kerry. Thanks.
Well, Andrea, I first interviewed you. I went back and looked. It was 2021 when you first came on the show. And I think, when did Privacy for Cars start? Well, it must have been right around that time.
We started, yes, just before CPPA came into effect. So yes, it'd been around for a year and a half, probably, when we did the first show.
And then the last time I had you here was 2023. I can't believe it's been that long ago. Now, of course, you and I have kept in touch. In fact, we even presented together. That was fun. You and I talked together at the Hacker Halted conference a couple Halloweens ago, which was great. I had a lot of fun doing that. And Mary, I've been following you on LinkedIn for some time and love to watch your posts there. We're actually going to talk about a few of those in the bonus podcast. But it's great to have you finally on the show, and we have a lot of things to talk about today. So tell me, what have you guys been up to since we last had you on the show, Andrea? How has the auto privacy landscape changed in the last couple of years? Catch us up a little bit.
Oh, wow. It's a completely different world. I mean, as you know, because you talk about this all the time, the world of privacy and security keeps evolving, not necessarily in a good direction, meaning that both companies and governments are creating additional pressure on everyday citizens. And so it's a more and more important topic, specifically for automotive. Gosh, a lot of things have changed. I think that 2 years ago. That's just about when probably the New York Times wrote about how data from cars was affecting people's insurance. That's where a
Yes.
lot of people were it started to really click in the heads of
Mm-hmm.
people that this is not an abstract concept. My weekly check that I write to my insurance company is actually affected by how I drive and data that I had no idea was flying out of my car.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big turning point. A lot of companies have been sued in the last couple of years,
Mm.
not just manufacturers, but insurance companies, data brokers, providers of technology in automotive space. And so there's a lot more pressure on those companies to do the right thing, which I think is a good development.
Yes.
Um, but at the same time, technology never stops. So, now we're putting more and more sensors in cars. I was recently at a presentation where a European manufacturer was bragging that their new cars have over 350 sensors. And they were bragging about the fact that they're putting AI into everything. And
Mm.
now the cameras that are outside of your car can automatically detect a bunch of things. The camera inside your car can detect a bunch of things. And so, your voice now is being analyzed by AI as you drive around. So that landscape is moving in the opposite direction. So from one side, there's more awareness, there is more legal action, there's more laws being passed. So all of this is more complicated. And we try to have a little role in this, right? So I think we've done a small but decent contribution to the world of privacy, but by pressing on this area for a while. I've had the honor of being asked for opinions by not only industry associations, but by, elected officials and regulators across the globe, which is, a great honor to be able to contribute to the topic of privacy and provide an independent technology heavy perspective on what is actually happening with the data of people. And from our side, we've grown staff. Yeah, I'll introduce you
Yeah.
today to Mary. She's absolutely wonderful. But also we've done a lot of things, and especially we're expanding in internationally. Recently, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce recognized us as one of the top 100 small businesses in America, and
Yeah.
particularly recognized us, as the global star among small businesses for our ability to build technology that is helpful globally. So it's been a good experience over the last couple of years. Honestly, I did not expect any of this when I started this essentially in a garage many years ago. So it's good to see that your dreams can come true.
Well, and you're so
But
right.
still a lot more to do.
Oh, sadly, yes, but glad to have you guys on the case because we need it. One of the other things I remember reading, I think since we last talked, was Ford had put out a patent application, and they said they weren't going to follow up on it, but I don't believe them, where they're going to start showing ads in your car based on the conversations you're having while you're driving. I don't think people realize that there are so many sensors inside the vehicle monitoring them. And then now that we've got AI getting thrown at everything, they're going to start using those for other purposes as well. And advertising, of course, it always comes back to advertising, which is the slippery slope that leads to all this other data problem. So, all right. So I know we've discussed this in the past, but it's been a while. So let's do a quick recap. And, maybe things have changed since we talked. Tell us about what kinds of personal data is currently being collected in consumer vehicle. Cause I think a lot of people will be surprised. And then I'm also curious, how do we know what's being collected? Some of this stuff is not terribly, a lot of it's very opaque, and it's not, there's not a lot of transparency when it comes to this. So I'm guessing since there has been lawsuits, maybe some of this came out in lawsuit discovery processes, for example. So catch us up. What should we know about what our car is getting about us, and how do we find that out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think people would be surprised by it. I mean, I was surprised when I first started working with privacy for cars just over a year ago by how much broader it was besides what's collected in the car, what apps are connected, when you sync your phone, what sort of data gets downloaded. Then there's the vehicle telemetry, so your braking habits. We've seen a lot of that with the insurance claims that Andrea had already talked about, and you've seen splashes of that all over the news, like if you brake hard, if you accelerate hard, your precise geolocation data, biometrics, like when you sit down on the seat and it measures how much you weigh for the airbags,
Right.
that's taking note of how much you weigh, voice prints for voice recognition. When you connect your phone, a copy gets downloaded to the car itself. So like your contacts would be on their calendar, credentials to accounts, streaming apps, search content, calendars, health data apps, exercise data, all sorts of things. And then with your user accounts, you get all sorts of things like your financial details, your salary, employment history. One of the types of data that really stands out to me often, there was this amazing graphic, and I know this is audio, but I really hope if anyone listening gets a chance to see this graphic, that Debbie, the data diva Reynolds, prepared for the IoT Board of Advisors. It's a Department of Commerce organization that was trying to understand how to protect data in IoT contexts. She has this incredible graphic, and it has all sorts of things, including the one that just stands out to me the most, which is sexual activity data.
Yes.
And you can get that from apps that are connected on your phone. So like if you've got a heart rate event, that's how you can get some of that. But citizenship status data, and Carrie, what I think is important is not just what data is collected, but what happens to that afterward. What's it being used for? Who is it sold or shared to? And one thing that you mentioned was it's kind of opaque. And you ask, how do we find out where this is from? Well, a lot of it's hiding in plain sight, actually, but it's inaccessible to most people. So you can read through privacy notices of the manufacturers and connected services, but it would take you hours and hours to do so. And the reading level required to understand that is usually either college or postgraduate level. That's measured by a score called the Fleisch-Kincaid reading level score. But what I do want to mention to your listeners is if you want to get a summary, just a high level overview of what's happening, what sort of data practices a manufacturer has, check out vehicleprivacyreport.com.
Yes.
And there you can find just a high level overview of what do all of these documents say. There might be 10 or more documents, and that might take you, 6 to 10 or even more hours to read. But Andrea and the team at Privacy for Cars created this website, vehicleprivacyreport.com, that gives you the greatest hits, shows you the level of reading score that you would need to read those documents. So that's one area. But then you mentioned lawsuits as well. And of course, there have been big splashy ones. The FTC settlements last year were pretty interesting. From that, you can find out that GM OnStar was collecting drivers' precise geolocation data every 3 seconds for some users, to an accuracy of 4.5 inches. So very precise location. It revealed your driving behavior, hard braking, like we said, hard acceleration, speeding, late night driving, seatbelt usage, and what happened to that data. Well, in that FTC settlement, we found out that they sold and shared it with data brokers, then sold that to insurance. So there's all sorts of ways this data is getting collected and getting out into the data ecosystem.
Well, the whole insurance thing is really, this started back several years ago when the insurance companies had these good driver programs. And they would say, well, if you put in this little OBD2 dongle in your car and let us read it either remotely or periodically by coming to the office or something, then, we will rate your driving and give you a better rate if you're a good driver. And I guess the converse of that obviously is if you're not a very good driver, it could adversely affect your insurance. But now we've got apps for our cars. And the cars themselves, as you said, are reporting all this data and selling it to others. And Andrea, you were alluding to this, that article where the guy, I think it was a guy in Florida or something, who tried to re-up his insurance, and all of a sudden everyone was quoting him 30% higher rates. And it's like, what's going on here? And one of them finally told him, like,
most insurers actually refuse to insure him, and he had no idea why. Yeah.
So that was obviously splashy. And you're right. There's so many of these things we just take for granted. Like, why should I care about this stuff? I don't care if they know that I'm going to the grocery store or whatever. There's a lot more to it than that. And it has a lot more implications. And we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah. Related to that, Carrie, there's also a story. There's the Florida guy. I think he was driving really hard, if I remember correctly.
Maybe.
He had some sort of supercar, I don't know, driving hard. But even everyday regular drivers get implicated by this.
Yep.
One of the stories that I heard that I'd love to share with your listeners is there was a gentleman who his insurance just skyrocketed for some reason. He's like, I can't figure this out. I'm a pretty safe driver. So he got his LexisNexis report, and it showed on his report that every single day he had a near collision. And that was the basis of why his insurance went so high up. And it turns out the near collision was when he pulled up into his driveway, his dog would run out and greet him. and get close to the door, and the car tracked that as a near collision every single day. And so it may not be all the folks driving around with lead feet and they know what they're doing, but it could be data that really isn't representative of what's actually happening. And now you're, again, implicated in this data ecosystem, and how that affects you in a financial way.
Well, ever since I read that article, I've been kind of worried too, because my car is often wrong. And my vehicle will make beeps and noises if I'm too close to something or if I'm approaching something too rapidly. Like, let's say I'm coming up to a left-hand turn lane and there's a guy in front of me and he's not going. And if I come up too close to him, my car will beep like, hey, hello, you're about to rear end this guy. But it gets it wrong a lot of times, but it's still storing it as if it was right. I mean, how do I plead that to my insurance company if they were to get that data? So I hope they're not getting that data. So far, my rates have not gone up, so we can hope.
Well, depending on what state you live in, you may have rights to opt out of that data selling and sharing.
I'm not in California. California seems to get all the good stuff. I'm in North Carolina. We don't get any of that stuff here. So you guys...
Well...
You guys recently put out a really lengthy report. And when I say lengthy, I mean, oh my God, I could not believe how big. The summary, I think, was 85 pages long. It's amazingly comprehensive. And you reported on dozens of different car brands and how they honor consumers' data rights, because this is becoming a thing now. And this is obviously where you guys are focused. So what was the goal of the report, and how did you report this monumental task?
Well, so I'll let Mary speak about what we did, because she was really a major architect of all this study. But I'd like to premise something, Carrie, because I want to be very clear with your audience, because often we ask about what type of companies Privacy for Cars. So I want to clarify, we are a for-profit company. So we keep the lights on by going to fleets and dealerships and auto finance companies and convince them to do the right thing and appear more trustworthy for their customers, because they actually do better things than their competitors. But there's an entire arm to what we do that is essentially treated as a nonprofit. And so there's a lot of things that we do we do them not because there's a obvious way of which we're going to be turning into revenue. We just do them because it's the right thing. So this report specifically on UX is a classic example of that. We have no dog in the fight of UX, and then we think it's absolutely wrong that consumers are not told what data is collected from them, how it's used, how it's shared. And when they go and try to say thanks, but no thanks, because my state allowed getting some rights under my law, they actually make it impossible for you to actually do that. And so this report was entirely based out of this and rights. And nobody has ever done a structured study that is really based on the facts. We hear a lot of talking points from companies, but let's go and do a study on what is the user experience online of people when they go on the website of their manufacturer. They want to say, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want my data to be used for being sold to an insurance company, for instance. So Mary, go ahead. Take it away. Sorry for jumping in.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. So getting back to your point, if you have privacy rights, how do you use them? And you had mentioned earlier in the green room, the California Privacy Protection Agency settlement with the American Honda Motor Company. Yeah. And that's really what inspired us to do this report that Andrea was mentioning. So what was super interesting about the CCPA settlement was it wasn't just about do they have the right privacy notices? Are they saying the right things? But what is the actual experience for the consumer? What sort of user experience are they receiving when they're trying to exercise these rights that they have? So that's what this was really about. How many forms do you have to fill out to exercise your right? How much information are they requiring you to submit in order to exercise those rights? Is that even required? How do you opt out? Can you do it with an authorized agent? When you have a consent choice, is it presented symmetrically so you can know to opt out or opt in? Do they honor global privacy control, universal opt-out mechanisms, those sorts of things? So the CCPA, or acronym soup, CPPA, which is now Cal Privacy, their settlement really created an example for us to build upon. So we took some of the criteria that they had that we could measure again and applied what the CPPA said to American Honda Motor Company and applied it across 49 other automobile brands in California. And what we really wanted to do is show what the current state is, what the actual experiences are, and then also show what good looks like. So this was a huge report. It was 1,800 pages long. We do offer a free summary. So if you want the greatest hits, you can go ahead and go to privacyforcars.com/UX-California and go ahead and get a copy for yourself. And one thing I want to mention about that is this is not the criteria that we have listed is universal. So it's not sector specific. Our report is obviously about auto brands, but you could take our methods and apply them to whatever other consumer industry that you have. So we really encourage other privacy professionals, take inspiration from our report and go do a study about what's happening in your industry.
Yeah.
And the one thing I also wanted to mention was giving a shout out to the consumers who do use their rights, because when you do use your voice, it draws this type of shining lights on what's actually happening. So when consumers use their rights, when they have them, when they demand better, the faster better becomes a reality. So actually, Andrea, could you tell us about what happened with Honda, the before and after?
I mean, one thing that is actually really uplifting is that within a matter of weeks, Honda went from, we scored what their all interface looked like. It was one of the worst performing brand and literally shot all the way to number one.
Wow.
Of all the criteria, they missed only one.
In weeks.
And in a matter of very few weeks. Yes. So again, this is important to us. And this is another reason why we wanted to do this report, because better is not only possible, but it is within arm's length. And all it takes is literally the strike of the pen. This is not a technological challenge. This is not a huge... the only thing that companies need to do to follow the example of Honda is to do exactly what Honda did, which is go and change a few things. A lot of these things are really not hard. The asking, 10 fields for you to submit an opt-out and realize that actually I can do it in just 2. It's something that a web team can probably do, turn around in 48 hours, including QA, right? So this stuff is actually not very hard at all. It's just a matter of will companies want to do it? And so back to what Mary said, very, very important for people to ask for these things. And at Privacy First, we're trying to make it easy for you. So if you go back to the website that Mary was mentioning, the vehicleprivacyreport.com, a few months ago, and so this is new compared to the last time you and I talked, Carrie, we actually now have buttons in there that not only where you can appoint us as an agent for free, which we've always done, but you can also do the job yourself. We'll help you, we'll guide you through where you need to go, what is the form, how to fill it. And by the way, if you don't get the response that you're supposed to be getting, what are the 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 regulators you can go and tell them about what your experience has been? Because that's important. I think that people underestimate how much power they have in their voice. And so we want to make it easier for them to have a megaphone.
All right, I want to circle back to a couple of things you guys mentioned because I want to make sure my audience understands this. First of all, you've mentioned agents a couple times, and if you're not in California, especially if you're in California, you might not understand how this works. But this notion of deputizing an agent to work on your behalf, tell us how that works and why that is so important.
Absolutely. So some privacy laws allow authorized agents to go do some of these privacy rights actions on your behalf because there are hundreds and hundreds of companies you may interface, and it takes actually quite a lot of time to opt out, do a delete request, an access request, whatever you're trying to do. So Privacy for Cars acts as an authorized agent for people that want to opt out or delete or even access requests in some cases, if those laws pertain, for consumers that need some help. So we get all sorts of folks submitting and saying they need help because it's not always so straightforward. And again,
it's not at all straightforward.
User experience study was like, what is the actual consumer experience? Is there friction? Is it easy to understand? Is it easy to opt out as easy as it was to opt in? So we have a lot of experience doing these opt-outs for folks, and it's a lengthy process. It takes, depending on the law, 30 to 45 plus more days to do that. And so if you're not really on top of this, if you're not micromanaging your opt-outs, you're opted in by default. And that's one of the issues with the way a lot of consent is handled in the United States. It's opt-in by default, and it's laborious to opt out. So we have that. And speaking of which a number of regulations in consumer privacy laws in the United States are trying to make that easier because that's a known problem.
Yes.
So a number of the privacy laws have what are known as universal opt-out mechanisms. One of the more well-known ones is global privacy control, and that's on a web experience. So you can put a setting on your computer that says, I just want to opt out from all of this tracking, just universally, right?
Yeah.
And companies are required by law to honor those. And one of the things that really stood out to me in our study was that in every single case that we looked at all 49 brands that we evaluated in that study, every single company got that right. So every single company honored the global privacy control requirements. Not all of them actually properly disclosed that they were doing it, but technically they all were. So that was super exciting to me that, a regulatory requirement that is easy. It's a setting. Your team can get that up and running. No problem. So I'd really like to see more of that type of opt-out requirements. But the thing about global privacy control, Carrie, is that it only works for web experiences. And in the car context, you're also dealing with the car itself, which is a big IoT device. So
you said that companies have to respond to this or have to honor this, but that's only if you're in a place in a jurisdiction for that, right?
Yes, correct.
Here in North Carolina, they don't give a damn about my GPC, unfortunately. So to be clear, if you're in a jurisdiction that requires it, then yes, it's a legal requirement. But anyway, go on.
The law matters and where you live matters, hence reaching out to your elected officials does matter.
Yes.
Again, part of the tools we offer on legal privacy support is, who's my representative? How do I send them a letter? How do I reach them on X or on their official website? Or how do I send them an email? So again, I think our job is to be the Sherpas. We work to make sure you reach the Himalaya of privacy for your vehicle, and we try to lighten the load. That's kind of the point. You still need to do some work, but we try to make it as easy as we can. We were talking about opt-out in the cars.
Yes.
Well, so in the last few years, interfaces in cars have started to evolve, and occasionally some models for some manufacturers in some years started to offer options to modify those settings. And nobody had ever done a study on those things. And so, of course, we figure, hey, that sounds like a fun use of time. So far, we tracked nearly 1,000 of those different interfaces. But of course, there's a lot of them, right? And we're in the process of generating a compendium to make it easier for people to actually know what are the choices, how to find them, and so on and so forth. And this is part of a bigger initiative that we're probably going to be unveiling in the next few months, but the nickname that we have for it is the disconnected car. And so you're getting here, Carrie, a little bit of I think you're the first public channel we're saying that we're actually going to be doing
exclusive.
This. So yeah.
Now we're talking about IoT devices in particular. And I know that you guys had a kind of a clever mechanism for doing this that was not web-based stuff or app-based stuff, because a lot of the apps we use don't have they're not web browsers, even though a lot of them build in their own web browsers, but sadly, which bypasses a lot of the controls that you have with your regular web browser. So what are my options? How do I indicate that I want to not be tracked if I don't have direct access to a GPC toggle?
Yeah, so we were trying to figure out that ourselves, right? So a few years ago, I started thinking about how do we create the equivalent of GPC in a world in which you're not operating through a web browser, which, by the way, is important for IoTs, but it's important also for your phone, because I'm sure that all of us had the experience of going on a web browser on a social media site, and if you have GPC on in one of the places in the world where it's mandatory to observe it, those companies actually have to observe it. But guess what's the first thing they tell you is, oops, you scroll one post, and now if you want to see the rest, go on the app. Why? Because on apps, there's no GPC, right? So as a consumer, you're constantly pushed into channels, and IoTs are wonderful for that, for companies. You're pushed into channel where it's really, really hard to understand what data is being collected about you and do really much about it.
Yeah.
And so a few years ago, I started to think about, well, how do we solve this? And I think that I have a bit of a past in hacking things over Bluetooth, so I know the protocol decently. And I was trying to figure out, well, what are some protocols in wireless that can be used and can be leveraged for a different purpose, which is to tell companies that you actually want to opt out. And so that's how we came up with something called opt-out code. And the idea is very simple, that you rename your device and you use a prefix, and we chose $0S, which stands for do not sell and share, but also $0. It's from $0, which is how much we think the company should be able to make out of your data without your consent. And if you rename that, then when you pair your device over Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc., that name actually carries together with the pairing. It's part of the pairing protocol, right? So it means that whatever device you connect it to, the device can read their name, and they could use it. They could use the first three letters of their name to say, oh, Andrea just connected his phone to the car, and now the car has a piece of information in it that says Andrea wants to opt out of it. And so Colorado had this process in which you could submit ideas for opt-out mechanism. And so I thought it was going to be fun to go and submit it. And I think I guess we got a bit more fun than we thought we were going to have, because within a matter of 2 months, Colorado shortlisted us as a possible viable mechanism. And at that point, almost every industry association we visit that deals with data, not just the car manufacturer, which is what this was designed for, but literally from the National Association of Broadcasters to anybody, started to write us letters saying, what the hell was this? Did you really read what you actually wrote, and how terrible of an idea this would be? And a long story short, the Colorado essentially told us, look, if this concept is very novel, so nobody's really prepared to deal with it. And we kind of like the idea. So keep us posted on your progress, and we'd love to hear more from you on how this concept evolves. And what is interesting is that now that we're in 2026, for instance, in Oregon, if you live in Oregon, the law says that you can use any mechanism, including opt-out code, to say no to opt-out of having your data used, and companies are supposed to listen to it. So if you have any listeners in Oregon, I highly recommend that they go on to the website optoutcode.com, and they learn about this, and they turn it on their phone. And then please reach out to us, send us an email at info@privacy4cars, tell us, share your story, and you use this, what reaction are you getting from companies, let them know that you use it, and see what they're saying, because they're supposed to be listening and honoring it. And so we want to hear more stories from people who actually go and use it.
That's great. Have you been approached by any legislators or whatever who might actually want to codify this into law, or maybe other standards organizations?
Well, so for instance, Oregon is one of the states that launches investigations into vehicle data. And so we've been engaged in conversations on, by the way, we launched this opt-out code. And so we think that also for automobile manufacturers, such as another manufacturer of IoT, should be listening to this January 1st. And so I think they're eager to, one more reason why, your listeners should be using it, because everybody wants to hear the stories about our companies actually honoring this signal the way the law says or not.
Right.
So the stories are important.
Yes. All right. So what kind of response have you gotten to this report? Have you heard back from lawmakers or policymakers or car makers based on this recent report? What kind of feedback have you already gotten on this?
I'd say it was mostly positive. Some folks that were caught off guard maybe a little bit, but we always do our disclosures in advance, so everyone in the study knew well in advance what we were doing. And we had a number of auto brands reach out to us and work with us. They were collaborative. They made improvements. We had regular calls. So we made that option available to everyone in the study. So we do thank the auto brands that took us up on that and made improvements. Some of them were very significant, and they improved their scores, much like I was saying with Honda. It's a matter of weeks if you implement some of these changes per the law to make it better for consumers again. So I would say it was overall positive. Yeah, we did have a number of regulators reach out to us as well. And we have a report, the summary report, that's available for free for everyone. And then for folks in media, government, academics, we provide the full 1,800-page report for free to those folks. It's a paid report for those who do not meet that criteria. But yeah, overall, very positive. So what I'd really like to see is anyone listening to this podcast, if you work in a consumer-facing industry, get a copy of the report and take inspiration, make your own.
And Kerry, I actually want to add that I'm actually very pleased with the fact that several automakers did engage in conversation. Was very constructive. Some of them went out of their way of saying this is actually so helpful because we wouldn't have had the time to go and do the analysis ourselves, and it's a very helpful benchmark. And as Mary said, many actually made the changes on the fly because I think we said this before, right? Honda was able to do changes in a matter of weeks. And so actually some of them, even though the timeline was not super long, we were able to make some meaningful advances before publication, which allowed us to publish them with a higher score. And we're proud of them. Some of them told us that they want to do changes, but not within the timeline, which is also, I think, great. We have not done a follow-up to that study yet, and we spent 1,000 hours on it. So, it's not something we want to repeat every week, as you can imagine. But I would not be surprised if many other manufacturers have actually made progress after the publication. And I think it's probably worthwhile eventually that, for us to take a second look, but also hopefully other nonprofits will want to take an inspiration from it and do it, as Mary said, not just for automotive, but this applies to literally any segment of retail. You can do the very same exercise. And there are so many examples in the report that I think it's literally, once you know how to do it, you can go and map a lot of companies. It's just a matter of time.
So I think this segues well into something else I want to ask you about. And you've often compared this to vehicle safety. Back in the day, it was a lot of manufacturers were not on board with doing that either until it was called out. And someone started doing independent analyses like yours that kind of showed where these guys were. And once it became transparent and public, that drove market changes. And it became different. It became something that manufacturers were touting, right? How do you see that applying to what you're doing today? And then do you envision eventually having car stickers having this on them as well? And what would that look like?
Well, the Department of Commerce has said that they should be having those stickers, which I think is encouraging. But I think there's a good title change going on in the industry. I think we're going through the phases of grief here, in which at the beginning, people denied that there was a problem in the first place. I don't think we're quite in the acceptance phase, but some brands have started to realize that maybe this idea of we're going to yank whatever data we want out of cars and not tell people and do whatever we want with it, maybe it's not going to be very long-lived. And there are people within those companies, including the security folks, right? So I had the chance to speak this year at ASCAR, which is not only the largest cybersecurity conference in automotive, but the board members, many of them are leaders in cybersecurity at big automotive companies, and they asked me to go and speak. And I think that's telling of the fact that there's a number of groups within the automotive industry that want to do the right thing. They may realize that maybe they don't have quite the charter or the P&L, able to do the kind of things that they would love to see, but the desire for change starts to be very real. So I'm encouraged.
I will add, we started this off with the vehicle stickers, just to kind of clarify what we mean by that. I would say a lot of folks, cars are a device that you hang on to for a number of years, ideally. Right. So a lot of cars on the road are between 12 to 16 years old, and they did not have this types of functionality back then. So keep in mind, this is a type of device that's different from like phones and laptops that would change generations, every couple of years. So with the vehicle stickers, so when you buy a car, a new car or a used car, there's a sticker on that says stuff like the fuel efficiency, right. What are some safety features on there? And what Andrea was mentioning, this IoT report for the Department of Commerce, they're suggesting they put some high-level data practices, data privacy information on that too, with a QR code so you can go get the full details, but making it visible so that people are aware. We know that's a problem.
Yeah. Yes.
They don't even know the capabilities of their car. And then secondly, can you make a more informed choice as a consumer? Maybe I don't want to buy this car. Maybe I do want to buy this car because I am more informed about what it is that I'm buying. It's not just 4 wheels and a steering wheel. It's actually a computer. You're buying a computer that has a lot of capabilities that the average person isn't aware about because they're not being told in a way that's understandable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Transparency. I keep coming back to this in so many different ways, but transparency is so important. I know we want, laws out of the gate that restrict this stuff. And that would, don't get me wrong, those would be great. But I think to get there, we're probably going to need transparency first, because I don't think most people understand what's really going on. And once they do, I think that will drive them to go to those town halls and grill their representatives on, you guys need to support this or I won't vote for you kind of thing. And then drive change that way. So transparency is huge. And so, yeah, I'd love to see some sort of a privacy sticker on the car, because they're bad. I mean, just not to spoil your report, but the bottom line is a lot of the scores were low. And I think it was very interesting that Honda went literally. I mean, you showed them both before and after. I think that was the only automaker you did. Honda, and it was at Acura or whatever the other one. They went literally from the bottom to the top of your list in terms of the scoring, which was great. And so again, it was driven by this transparency of what they were doing. All right, so we've talked a lot about regulations. We've talked about CPRA, and there's also GDPR. Let's think globally a little bit now too. So talk to me about some of these regulations that have kind of come online in the last few years. How have they helped in the situation of car data? It seems almost like I remember reading some articles that GDPR was particularly like missed for vehicles. Like it was the car makers were either saying they were exempt, or it was just they were overlooked. So how do some of these data laws, and there's this new EU Data Act as well, have they improved our situation with vehicles?
Well, I'll take the GDPR one. The law is fantastic. The law is very clear. The law does not exempt cars, does not exempt automotive companies. So these protections apply just like they would to any other company that falls under GDPR. I would say, Carrie, the issue is what's happening in practice. Mm-hmm. So GDPR came out, in 2018, and now it's 2026. Okay, so what's happened in the last 8 years? Unfortunately, we still see a lot of privacy harms stemming from non-compliance with GDPR requirements. In fact, the ICO recently came out and confirmed, the GDPR applies to cars. It applies to automotive business. It applies to dealers. It applies to rental cars. We even did a report. If anyone's interested in learning more about that, go to privacyforcars.com/GDPR, where a King's Counsel said the same thing. Basically, in essence, when a car changes hands, the car needs to have the data on the systems removed, wiped, deleted. And I'm sure a number of you have experienced, in a rental car experience or a dealership where you go in the car and it's, Bob's iPhone's still attached to this. And you see a bunch of addresses or
you try to add your phone. And it's like, I'm sorry, it's full. We have too many phones already in the car.
Right. One of them that was pretty wild. We had a friend who bought a car, and keep in mind that most people are buying pre-owned vehicles. Yeah. So that's like 75% of the market. So new to them, but not a new car. And it still had the prior owner's credit card account attached to it. So when they went to go charge the car for the very first time as an EV, it charged the prior driver's credit card information. So we see examples like this all the time. In Europe, we just did some consumers have been doing a study, and they found all sorts of things like people's phones, which may include their full names. When we talked about when you sync a phone, it has the name, it pulls the phone name, addresses to residences. In one case, we were able to find a prior rental car person went to a brothel after they stopped at a liquor store and after work and after they left a residential place. It was like, whoa, what kind of day was this person having? But my question is, why do we even know about that? We shouldn't. So GDPR definitely applies. We need to get more automotive businesses living up to their obligations and actually having the technical, organizational, robust processes to delete that data every single time that car changes hands.
It often comes down to enforcement. And we think once you get the regulation, we're set. We finally got the regulation. But if the organization is not empowered to enforce it, if they're not giving resources, money, and people, and if at the end of the day it takes too long to enforce, or there's so many other things that still also have to fall into place, even once regulations are in place. So yeah, that's a good point.
And I'll just say one more thing on that topic. Something that listeners can do, if you work in a privacy or a security role at a large company and you might have a fleet, put in place policies to protect both your employee personal data in your fleet vehicles, your cars, and also your corporate data. So we do have a sample data disposal policy and data management policy for companies. You can download that at privacyforcars.com/CISO, CISO. It's on page 49. Basically, it says any sort of automotive provider you have, whether that be a fleet company or a rental company, that you as a company require them to do a few things. One, disclose what data is collected and used and shared and sold in that car, so everyone's on the same page. And then secondly, when that car changes hands or when it is defleeted, all of the personal and corporate data is properly deleted off of that car, and you get a certificate showing that you've done your due diligence for that. So you can, without those regulations that are putting pressure, you can put pressure from the contracts that you have with your automotive providers to do the right thing.
I'm glad you brought that up because that brings up some edge cases that I don't think a lot of people think about. And so there's fleet vehicles. So we talk about how our cars are being tracked and how they're giving up all this telemetry. What about cop cars, ambulances, city buses, fire trucks? I mean, they're all vehicles. They all came from the same manufacturers, maybe off a different line. But I'm curious, do you guys know if those kind of vehicles are also emitting the same kind of data? Do they get a special deal with the manufacturers to make sure that data is not collected? Do we know?
Well, so I know a couple of manufacturers have a very separate instance of the cloud for certain government customers. And so I would only guess that then, that data is also treated in a different way. But I mean, the tech is the tech, right? The device is the same. It's not that they're going to be building cars differently if the government buys it versus you buy it, right? So the data collection is going to be the same. Again, I know of a few rare cases when on the back end and data is treated in a different way. But I think that, one thing that hopefully will help your audience, think about this in a different way is that a car is really not any different than a giant phone, but unfortunately it has three very big differences. One is that there's a hell of a lot more sensors, right? Your phone set has tens of sensors. As we said at the beginning of this call, your car has hundreds. So whatever problems you think you have on your phone will obviously multiply them by 10, and that's your starting point, right?
Yeah.
Then the second big difference is that your phone is typically encrypted at the factory. Nowadays, most the phones are not, the lowest tier that you can possibly buy. They have encryption by default, and so unless you know the PIN, you have the face and the fingerprint of the person. Pretty hard to get to this data. Cars do not. The only factor of authentication is the key, and so imagine how many people have access to the keys.
Yeah.
And then the entire hard drive, which is not really a form of hard drive, but just for simplicity of communication, the hard drive of the car is typically encrypted, which means everything you have, including when you pair your phone, all the protections you had on your phone are gone. Okay. And the third difference is that it is the biggest loophole on the Fourth Amendment.
Yes.
And that's actually really important, right? So imagine this. If you are driving and a cop stops you and says, "Hey, Carrie, hand me your phone," you can lock the phone, hand them the phone, and tell them, "I actually want you to produce a warrant before you go and tap into my phone." And they would have to stop right there and then because they cannot do anything at that point without a warrant. Or they can ask you, "That's okay, sir. Can you please step out of the vehicle?" And they can inspect your text messages through your infotainment system with no warrants whatsoever.
Wow.
And that's not right? So
No.
again, I think that people need to recognize that cars are special. And unfortunately, they're special in ways that are not very positive for privacy. And that means that we need to put some extra effort. So whatever policies you as an individual have to protect your own personal devices, whatever, if you work for a company, whatever policies your company has for laptops and phones,
Right.
it is probably a very wise idea to do the very same things as much as possible for cars, as much as technology allows it, because clearly cars are a little bit different, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, before we wrap up, I want to touch on the EU Data Act, because that was something that you guys mentioned that I don't think I'd even heard of. Tell me about the EU Data Act and how it applies to maybe car data.
Yeah. So what is interesting, so the EU Data Act is really, let me take a step back. So GDPR divides the world in three categories. You have data subjects. These are people like you and I that are protected by the law and whose data is collected. And then you have these two big categories of controllers. These are the people that could have control over the data and the access that has the data. And then you have processor where third parties are just passing stuff around at the direction of the consumer, right? And so that's how GDPR is structured. That essentially controllers have an obligation to protect the privacy, and processors have very little obligations because they're just appointed by. And so as a byproduct of that law, imagine when you go and talk to companies, say, can you please minimize my data? Can you do things? Everybody tries to be a processor because that's how you get out of having to do anything, right?
Right.
So that's what's set up in GDPR. The EU Data Act was really, the desire of it was to say the individuals who use the device and have access to the device and are the owners of the device must be able to own the data, control the data. Okay. And what is unique about it is that it essentially is a much grander scheme on how right to repair discussions have been had here in the United States, right? So if you have a laptop, you have the right under this act to have any access to the data of the laptop, any app that ran on it. You can go to those companies and ask to have any data they collect about you. You can decide to go import it from app A to app B. You can do all those things. And this is really new, right? It came into effect into September. And so we've done an assessment on how prepared companies are in automotive, not so much. But I think that companies will improve over time. But what is unique about the Data Act is that it says in there that, of course, you can pass around data to other parties. For example, I could decide to give my data to my repairer, but then that receiver of the data has an obligation to protect anything that has to do with personal information. And so everything still needs to, so it's a way to create a mechanism for exchanging data while keeping privacy protections. And we think it's good if companies can follow it. And unfortunately, in the United States, what we see is that we've seen companies wanting your data without having to pay for it and paint it as this is a great thing for a consumer when actually it isn't. And so, for instance, there is a proposal of law that is called the Driver Act, and we never really talked about this publicly because there's been some press about it, and all the press was absolutely oohing and howling on how this is wonderful for consumers, and I think it's not. I think it's absolutely the opposite, because if there's one thing that should terrorize people more, then there's a couple of dozens of companies that make cars that have access to your data and can do whatever they want, which is the reality we live in today. I think the only thing worse than that is to say, well, we're going from a couple of dozens of companies to thousands of companies. And we're talking about banks, insurance, rental car companies, companies that have fleets that want, under this schema, to have the right to extract whatever they want out of your car and do whatever they want with it without any other limit. And this is painted as, and by the way, we're going to be forbidding the manufacturers from doing that. So, again, the people that are proposing these research, again, rental companies, insurance companies, right? These are the type of companies that are pushing for this law, right? They're saying this is wonderful for consumers because they're giving this right to the owners. And the narrative that they're writing is that the owners are people like you and me, Carrie, and Mary, that we bought with our hard dollars a car. That's not what this law is about. Okay, because the reality is that with a new car at $50,000 in average and a used car at $30,000 in average, most people do not have the luxury of walking to a dealership, writing a personal check, and getting out of there with the keys. Most of us have to finance a vehicle. So guess what? The name on the title is actually not yours. It's the bank's. So guess what? Under this law, they are the owners.
Oh, geez.
So... the second in which say your manufacturer is not allowed to have this data anymore, okay, the law says, however, it's okay for manufacturer to share with affiliate. So every manufacturer has as an affiliate a bank.
Sure.
And if the bank writes your lease or your loan, guess what? They can do exactly the same things they do today. So there's been literally zero progress for you. And this is entirely an obfuscation and a money grab and a power grab that is being narrated as great for consumers. And I think it's absolutely terrible.
Wow. That's horrible. Okay, guys. I know we're getting late here. So let's wrap this up with some practical advice. Let's say I just bought a new car. And like brand new, not only new to me, but new off the manufacturing line. How do I minimize the data that it collects and shares? What are my options today? And then contrast that with if it's a used car.
Well, I would say if it's a brand new car, right off the assembly line, go to vehicleprivacyreport.com, again, where we walk folks through exactly what they can do to better protect their privacy, whether that's opting out of data sales and shares and understanding what your insurance company has. One thing that Andrea taught me, which was super interesting, is what happens if you get in an accident. Can you file an event-driven data deletion request with your insurance company? So if your car is totaled, will they delete the data off of that car for you before they scrap it? And then with the used car situation, I would say check out our Privacy Care dealer list. Again, you can find that at vehicleprivacyreport.com. There's a list. You can see if there are any Privacy Care dealers near you that would have data disclosures. So what is this car capable of collecting? So you know what you're buying. It's kind of like that vehicle window sticker we were talking about that isn't required yet, but you can still get the information from vehicleprivacyreport.com. And then, did they properly delete the prior owner's data off of it and disconnect the connected apps of the prior owner? So that's super important so that you're not hooked up to someone you don't know anymore. And then making sure that any sort of connected apps are in your name. So yeah, I would just say go to vehicleprivacyreport.com as a starting point.
I've used this tool myself, and it's just based on VIN, as I recall. So even if you're a prospective buyer and you're on the lot, and the VIN number is right there on the car, it's either on the sticker or you can look at the windshield and find it. You also link to their privacy policies and all sorts of other information, good information about that vehicle. So you can actually use that prior to making the buying decision as well.
Yeah. And also, Carrie, the VINs are usually available online too.
Right, true.
So
yes.
it's not like a secret number. So if you go on just looking at inventory, you can usually find that. If you go to a Privacy Care dealer, they usually have a link to one of our reports. So you can pull that VIN from your online shopping experience. But if you also want to check your own car, usually your VIN is also printed on your car insurance card. So literally just reach in your back pocket and you can find that.
Yep. All right. So if I'm selling a car and I want to try to take matters in my own hands, how hard is it for me to try to scrub my own vehicle of data before I get rid of it?
Well, so you bring up an interesting point. One of my colleagues had the phrase, that phrase buyer beware, but they said, actually, this is also seller beware. Because again, if you're taking your car, if you're trading it in, and the dealership or whoever's getting this car next doesn't have a data disposal policy and you don't know how to do it, because who does? I mean, why would you know that? How often are you doing this?
Right.
They are auto businesses. They should know, right? And ideally use the organizational technical tool that we sell to auto businesses to do this properly, correctly, and in an auditable way. But yeah, so seller beware is also important. So you're going to want to make sure all of your data is deleted out of the car, including all of the contacts that we talked about, all your phone messages, all your user accounts, and then also your garage codes if you've got those programmed in the cars. A lot of people forget about that. Definitely you don't want your home address and your garage door code still left in a device that you no longer have access to. And who's the next person driving this? So you'll want to do that, but then you're also going to want to disconnect all of the apps as well and make sure that whoever's driving this car next, maybe they've got a lead foot or they drive late at night or they have near collisions with their dog every single day. That data is not getting attributed to you and it's not being collected under the false consent of the prior car user, not the new one. So there's a lot to do here. Really you want to disclose, understand what's happening in the car. You want to delete the data off of it and disconnect all of the remote apps and accounts. Wow.
That is a lot. And I'm sure most people don't have any clue that they need to do that when they sell the vehicle. That's just something we haven't had to do for decades. And all of a sudden that's a thing now.
Well, let me compare this. When you go trade in a phone or a laptop, do you do any of these things? Absolutely not. Like the company that you're dealing with has policies and procedures. There's hundreds of companies that do data disposal. I mean, we do this for paper. Everyone knows there's those paper shredding companies, but cars really need to have an opportunity to catch up. That there are tools readily available on the market. This is, again, not a technical issue. It's an organizational one. And I think consumers expect the same sort of experience they have with other IoTs, like your phone. you're not expected to know all the ins and outs of how to properly delete that before it gets resold. Same thing with a laptop. No company would say, just resell the laptop with all of our financials, Excels on there, right?
Yeah.
That's never going to happen. So we need the same experience, the same consumer experience to be brought into the automotive context.
And you've got the badge for the dealerships that are certified. I don't know if you certify them or if you just work with them, but the fact that they could do these things and they're labeled as such, and you give them a badge they can display. As a consumer, as you're going to these dealers, ask them about these things, prompt them for these things, make them aware that they have these things, so that maybe in the future, even if it's not for you, maybe in the future they'll look into that and sign up for that program, right?
Absolutely. Privacy is power, and to everyone listening, please use it. We need you.
Real quick before we go, what's next for you guys? What's next for privacy for cars? Any other legislation we should be on the lookout, or any other things that we can do as consumers and citizens to support what you guys are doing?
I'm actually very proud that we had our millionth visitor to Vehicle Privacy Report recently.
Oh, wow.
So that's really cool. And, we don't spend a penny in advertising. So all of that is through word of mouth. And thanks to people like you, honestly, Carrie, that do the work of telling people, hey, there's tools out there and they're free and they're really meant to be free, not because we want to monetize you, but because, again, we're building these tools entirely to make sure that consumers have access to information today. It's really, really hard to get. So be informed. I think being informed is always my first mantra. Is people know more, they'll make better choices and they'll demand for better. And so do this exactly in this order. Be curious about the world, be curious about privacy, find companies like us that try to do the right thing and provide free tools for consumers, and ask questions. And bother companies and bother elected officials. And I a few years ago, I live in Atlanta. A few years ago, I had the chance to meet Representative John Lewis, and he always talked about doing good trouble. And
Yes.
I think that I think we owe it to all ourselves to do occasionally some good trouble, because only good things come and happen when we all do our little part in doing a little bit of good trouble.
Guys, that was fantastic. It was so good to talk about this, and we'll have to have you back a little sooner than 3 years next time. Great to talk to you both. Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
It's always great to talk to Andrea. They're doing some really good stuff. And privacy in cars is just such a nightmare. So I'm really glad these guys are out there making it much more visible to the average consumer what's going on, and working with automakers and car dealerships and others to improve the situation, at least to draw a bright light on the situation so we know what's going on. There are a lot of things we threw out in today's show. I've done my best to put links to all of the important ones in the show notes, including the several different resources that were mentioned on the Privacy for Cars site, the Vehicle Privacy Report, the opt-out code, and yes, even that slide that Mary talked about from Debbie Reynolds that really does have a lot of information on it. So I linked to the whole presentation, and you could jump right to that slide, but there's other good stuff in there as well. I also linked to the other reports that they talked about. There's a lot of good stuff in the show notes today. And I also really want to recommend that you go try the Vehicle Privacy Report. Do it on your own car or cars. Again, all you need is the VIN number, and you can find that like on your car registration, on your insurance card. You can find it on the car itself. If you go to the driver's side, look through the windshield right in front of the driver on the dashboard. It should be there somewhere, maybe on the edge of the door when you open it up. And by the way, if you're not familiar with this, if you take a picture of that VIN number, at least with a modern iPhone, I would hope that Android phones do this now as well. But if you take a picture, you can actually, from your phone, copy and paste the text out of the image. So you don't have to try to, look at the image and manually type it in. So it's really, really easy to do. And just check it out. There's a lot of information that they've got there that's worth looking at. Run a report on your own car and see what you find. Also, if you have not enabled Global Privacy Control, or GPC, in your web browser yet, or browsers if you use multiple browsers or if you have multiple computers, you definitely should do that, even if you're not currently living in a jurisdiction where companies are required to honor it, for a few reasons. First of all, you're proclaiming your desire not to be tracked. We want to make everybody aware that we don't want our data to be being collected and sold. Second, the state or region that you are in hopefully someday will require that signal to be honored, and if you've got it set up now, it will just magically work when that time comes. Also, some sites are just honoring it regardless of where you're coming from because it's the right thing to do. So see the show notes. I actually wrote an article about this, not only how to set it, but also how to verify that it's working, which is also key. And I even updated that article at the end of that article to talk about the opt-out code as well. So the opt-out code thing is a really interesting idea. I did put a link directly to it in the show notes, but just to make sure you understand what we're talking about here, it's kind of a secondary way for you to indicate that you don't want your data to be sold. The GPC really only works in web browsing contexts. So Andrea basically came up with another way to indicate in other contexts that you don't want your data shared or sold. So on wireless interfaces like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, your devices, your laptop, your smartphone, whatever, has a name associated with it. And that name is usually broadcast to the devices that you're trying to connect to, and they can see your device name. And so since they can see your device name, you could change your device name to have this little prefix, $S, that means don't sell my data. It's this opt-out code. I don't know how well supported this is right now, but apparently it is starting to gain some traction. And so again, it doesn't hurt to put it there. And as more places start to respect it, then it will just automatically work. It's pretty darn clever. All right, so the patrons will get some bonus Q&A as usual on Thursday. I asked Andrea and Amico a little bit more about CarPlay and Android Auto, and whether the reason that a lot of manufacturers are saying they're not going to support them anymore is due to less access to user data. And also in that discussion, I learned about Android Automotive, which sounds the same, but it's different from Android Auto. And it's actually like a dashboard OS by Google. I've heard it's also called Google Built-in. I guess maybe that's a marketing term. But this would be the operating system that kind of runs your entertainment system and maybe some of the environmental controls. That's a new thing I wasn't aware of. We dig a little bit deeper into where Andrea wants to go with privacy for cars down the line. And then Mary had posted a couple very interesting things on her LinkedIn account. A couple stories. One of them we actually talked about here in reference to surveillance pricing, but I got some more information from her. She was the one who posted the picture of her little customer report that the manager from the restaurant that they knew really well showed her and took her behind the scenes to find out what information was being collected about her. We talked about that story. And then she had a really chilling story about the German Stasi, and they're making some of their old records available, and what somebody she knew found that was about one of her best friends that was really alarming. So anyway, the patrons got some bonus content coming on Thursday as usual. All right, we got a lot of great shows coming up. We'll, of course, have a news show next week, but I've got a lot of great interviews coming up. So if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that now, and then you won't miss any of that. All right, that's going to do it for this week, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and until next week, as always, don't get caught with your drawbridge down.